Good evening, and thank you for joining us as we dive into a topic that is becoming more and more well known to our students and families. Tonight, we have the pleasure of having an MSJ parent, Miss Heather Eshleman, from the Maryland Center of Excellence in Problem Gambling, where she is the prevention manager. She works with organizations, schools, and government agencies to prevent and educate underage and problem gambling. During her presentation, we'll hear from William Hinman, who is the Peer Recovery Support Supervisor with the Maryland Center of Excellence on Problem Gambling. William assists Maryland residents who struggle with gambling to navigate recovery, treatment, resources, and help remove any barrier to recovery. We'll have them present, and then in the last 15 minutes, we'll have them answer any viewer questions. Please put any question you have into the chat so we can relay it to them as the night goes on. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Eshleman.
Mr. Luckman, and hello everyone out there. Some of you I know. Since I'm at a Catholic school, I have the privilege to actually start with a prayer. So in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Dear Jesus, we lift up today anyone that's struggling with an addiction, especially due to gambling. And Lord, we just pray that you will help them, give them strength and courage, and to give them connections with people that can provide them help and hope. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. In the name of Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. All right, so I'd like to start off also in the Catholic school, who is the patron saint for addiction? So I think some of you out there may know that answer. So this is the statue that's at St. Anthony's Shrine in Ellicott City. And the answer is St. Maximilian Kolbe. So if you know anyone in your life that's suffering from an addiction, please pray to St. Maximilian Kolbe to give that person support. And their loved ones, too, need support. The next slide is also a prayer that you can find on the internet, again, to pray for someone that may be suffering from an addiction. So we're not going to pray this one tonight. But as you look at addiction, and I know Mr. Luckman had Mr. Goldberg come in last year and speak about alcohol and drug prevention and just what is the issue of addiction that way. I actually come from that background as well. I was 16 years with alcohol and drug prevention in Anne Arundel County. So the last 6 years, though, I focused on problem gambling prevention and underage gambling prevention as gambling has really expanded here in our state. But what is addiction? Basically, it's like a compulsive or chronic physiological or psychological need for a habit-forming substance or behavior. And the reason we say behavior is because gambling is a behavior. You're not injecting anything in your body or consuming anything. So it's totally about the connections in the brain and what is, kind of triggering the brain to continue this activity of gambling. So it has harmful physical, psychological, and social effects, and typically causing well-defined symptoms such as anxiety, irritability, tremors, or nausea, upon withdrawal or abstinence. So as you can see today, we're going to go through the slides, but gambling truly is an addiction, and it is in the DSM, which is the mental health diagnostic criteria. So it is officially a mental illness. So when we look at gambling, or the definition of gambling, there's really three parts to it. The first part is, like it says up here, something of value has to be risk. So generally we think about money. So oftentimes what parents don't think of is that there could be virtual money involved in a video game, for example. So it could also be something like cryptocurrency, which is virtual money. So as our technology evolves, there's more and more forms of things of value that are virtual that could also be used for gambling. So there has to be a game subject to chance or a sporting event or contest that whatever a value is wagered on, And then there's this uncertain outcome is the third part. So basically, there is a win or a loss. And today I have an audience out there that is virtual, but when we go into classrooms and we do schools, I always ask the kids, well, whose odds are in favor to win? And the kids always know odds are in favor of the house. So whoever is putting on that gambling activity is the one that's in favor to win. So basically, if you're risking money, you're much more likely to lose than you are to win. So that's something that we always want students to walk away with. It's not easy to win. Now, if you look at this next slide, this is the expansion of gambling in Maryland. So as you can see, in 1873, horse racing became legal in the state of Maryland. It's still a pretty popular sport, not so much among our youth, but we do have Preakness and lots of big events when it comes to racing on horses. We have the Maryland Lottery, which has been around now 50 years. So that's another one that is a big moneymaker for the state. And then we had in 2010, we had the first casino open. Now we have 6 casinos open here in Maryland. And everyone is within an hour or even a half-hour drive in the state of Maryland to a casino. So it's very easy to access. And then when we look at 2021, sports betting came on the scene. First, it started in the casinos and in a few restaurants. Now it's online. So this is the one that's really become a hot topic, because when you're talking about online gambling, particularly sports betting that's legal, it's easy to access and it's very convenient. So what forms of gambling are we concerned about when it comes to our youth? Well, lottery is definitely one, because scratch-off tickets are very popular. Some parents or family members mistakenly give lottery tickets to those that are underage, like as Christmas gifts. And that's strongly recommended not to do that, just because you are starting to trigger the brain at a young age to perhaps develop an addiction to gambling. So give other gifts, not lottery tickets at Christmas. But we also now have vending machines in our convenience stores. So they're not always monitored. So we have to be careful when we send youth and the youth out there. When you go in a convenience store, these products are right in your face, is what I'm saying. And you just have to know the risks of them. Sports betting's the next one. So as I said, that kind of came on the scene a few years ago. Now accessed through mobile apps, heavily advertised. States making lots of money on that. So that's one of concern. The online gambling, currently not legal here in Maryland, but there's a bill in this current legislative session to legalize what's called iGaming, which would be to put online gambling in mobile apps as well. So that would be casino-style games would be legal here in the state. We don't know if that'll pass or not, but it's been introduced the last 3 years. There's still dice games. Oftentimes in Baltimore City, you might see people playing dice on the corners. That still exists. Fantasy sports, if you'd like basketball or football, you can follow your fantasy team for a season. And you can do that on operators such as DraftKings and FanDuel, just like you would on sports betting. And then casino, even though, under 21, not allowed in casino, and they're pretty strict about that, we do have college-age students that often go to the casino and gamble. Cryptocurrency I talked about. Oftentimes people will trade and use cryptocurrency to gamble. And then finally, loot boxes. So loot boxes would be mystery boxes within video games. So if you out there, or parents out there, if your youth are making a lot of purchases through video games, there could be some gambling going on with that. The mystery boxes are, you put up a small amount of money. You don't know what's in them. It could be something you win or you could lose it. It could be nothing of value. So that's another thing that oftentimes youth can rack up a lot of money on those type of transactions. Now, the next slide, private games. Sometimes people just play games on the weekend, like poker, among peers or family members. So that one can also be troublesome if someone's betting a lot of money on a particular game. So I put this up here. Is this gambling? So this is a type of claw machine that many of the kids out there and parents, we brought our kids up. We might go to the arcade or Chuck E. Cheese's, and it does meet the definition of gambling because you're putting money into the machine, the claw, or that there is a game involved, and then you may or may not get a prize. And then sometimes tickets are also come out, and then you go get a prize. So it definitely is a gambling type of behavior. I mean, there's different levels of risk to different types of gambling, so that's something also we talk about today. I definitely would minimize even the claw machines and those type of things for young children. Is this gambling? You buy a raffle ticket. We know that people buy a lot of raffle tickets to support fundraisers. Again, it's a very low-risk gambling activity, but it does meet the definition of gambling because you don't know if you will win. And then this is the picture of the one that really is causing, I think, an increase in calls to our helpline, is the mobile betting. Because again, it's just very quick and easy to access. So just because we have a lot of young people out there, I wanted to just show you very quickly the minimum ages for different types of gambling activities here in our state. So the more recent forms of legalized gambling are age 21, but the older forms are 18. So, and I think that's due to education. Now that people recognize gambling as an addiction, they don't want people that are young, under 21, that are accessing gambling activities because they are more at risk to have a gambling problem later in life. I'm going to turn it over to Will Hinman. He's going to talk a little bit about his story for recovery.
Hey, thank you all for joining us tonight. My name is Will Hinman. I'm a certified peer recovery sports specialist and a peer supervisor here at the Maryland Center of Excellence on Problem Gambling. A peer is someone in long-term recovery. It can be from an addiction, it can be from a mental health disorder, it can be basically just someone in recovery from some sort of struggle that they walk through. Now, I happen to be in recovery from a gambling disorder. At the end of my gambling run, I gambled for 23 years. I was actually suicidal and had a plan in place to take my life. Obviously, I was struggling with mental health because I was depressed. I was struggling with anxiety, suicidal ideation, and I'm also a recovering alcoholic. My gambling and alcohol went together for many, many years. And I'm not here to preach to anyone today. What we do is we have 5 peers that work for the center. We answer calls that call the 1-800-GAMBLER helpline number, and generally those are people that have gambled more money than they can afford to lose and have gotten themselves in a very bad place due to their gambling. What we do is we share our lived experience and hopefully offer them hope and a solution and another way out so they don't have to turn back to gambling as a solution and try to win their money back. We call that chasing our losses. Once we start chasing our losses, things can get bad very, very quick. It took me 23 years before I finally crossed that invisible line and started chasing my losses, but we're seeing it progress much quicker these days, because back in my gambling days, I didn't even have a cell phone until I was 22, 23 years old, till after I graduated from college. They didn't have the online gambling. I had to call a bookie to call my plays in. They didn't have all the prop plays they have now. There weren't casinos in Maryland. I used to have to, drive 3 hours to Atlantic City to take a trip to a casino or fly to Las Vegas. So now it's everywhere. It's all around us. So what I like to say is, life is really just about making smart choices. There's a lot of temptations out there, much more than there were when I was growing up. All I can do is share my lived experience and hopefully plant some seeds so that you don't repeat some of the mistakes that I made when I was young. And I can tell you now, I'm 53 years old. I can look back to high school like it was almost yesterday. It doesn't feel like that long ago. I can remember my college years and after I graduated from the University of Maryland, and I can see the mistakes I made, the bad choices that I made for myself that I wish now I could go back and, you know, repeat that in my past. And unfortunately, we only get one shot at our past. So all I can do is share my story and hope that maybe I save someone out there from making the same mistakes I made. So I'll tell you a little bit what it was like, what happened, and what it's like in recovery for me today. So I started, I was an athlete in high school. You know, I would say sports was definitely my great escape. As a kid in middle school, you know, I was very shy. I was an introvert. My parents divorced when I was very young. My mom had to move us around a lot as a single mother. And I had a tough time making friends, but I always found myself on the field, out on the courts. I would say sports definitely played a major role in saving my life and keeping me hanging out with a healthy group of kids. You know, we were always outside playing or riding our bikes. I was a very active kid. In high school, my mom remarried. We moved to a different county. I had to make friends all over again. I was still an introverted child, and I really resisted drinking when I started seeing drinking and alcohol introduced at the parties at around 17 years old. I was the kid on the sideline watching everybody else have fun. You know, my buddies are hooking up with the girls and stuff, and I'm just sitting there with the frown on my face. You know, and I remember my buddy on the basketball team said, "Why don't you drink?" I said, "I just don't want to." And I don't know if it's because I knew we weren't supposed to be drinking. We're under the age of 21, or I just thought it was unhealthy because I was an athlete. But then I finally gave in to alcohol at the age of around 17 years old. And I got a job, funny enough, in an Irish pub where alcohol was just all around me. So I became, I developed an unhealthy addiction to alcohol at a very early age. And it was pretty obvious very early on that I was drinking alcoholically. Then I went off to college. At around age 19, I was introduced to my first bookie. I was going to a trip to New York with my girlfriend, and we had never been to the big city, right? And I wanted to go to a New York Giants game. I thought it'd be fun to go to Giants Stadium, experience what it was like going to a Giants game. So I bought tickets to the Giants-Cardinals game, and I didn't care about either team. I wasn't a fan of either team, but a buddy of mine said, "You know, you can call a bet in on those. If you want to call this guy, you can put a bet in on that game." So I called this guy up. He took my information. He was a bookie. I knew nothing about gambling at this point in time, but I told him I wanted to take the New York Giants because I wanted to root for the home team, and I wanted to take the over in the game because I wanted to root for a lot of points. I wanted to root for an exciting game. Well, I always say the worst thing that could happen to someone that might be at risk for slipping into a gambling addiction is they win. I won both sides. I had a little bit more money to spend on that trip, you know, and I remember the dopamine hits. Heather was talking about how it acts on the brain as a drug. There's no doubt about it. Gambling was my favorite high for many years. You know, the way I always describe it is alcohol made me feel comfortable in my own skin. Gambling was my favorite high. I just loved the effect, the action. I was an action player for many years. The way I looked at it is if I didn't have money on something, it wasn't worth me doing it. And it was anything. If I was playing video games, if I was playing golf, darts, pool, you know, whatever it was, watching a game, even if I was watching my favorite team play, I had to have money on them to make the game more exciting. And I lived that way for a lot of years. And I didn't gamble more than I could afford to lose. But when I look back, it was the preoccupation that really killed me. First of all, gambling changed the whole trajectory of my life, as did alcohol, because when I graduated from college, I was a criminal justice major. I had career plans for myself, but I decided I was going to work in the restaurant industry a little bit longer, just have a little bit of fun, and that ended up me staying in the restaurant industry for 20 plus more years. And the reason why I did that, if I was to be honest with myself, was because I could drink the way I wanted to drink and gamble the way I wanted to gamble, and it was around me all the time, and it was very normal behavior. The other reason I stayed in that industry, quite honestly, was because of fear. I was afraid to chase I was afraid to face the world, you know, and I got married at a pretty young age, about 25 years old. Gambling, the preoccupation with gambling, having Ravens season tickets and going to the games with my buddies every week, or hanging out at the bars, watching the games all the time. You know, that took a toll on my first marriage, and my first wife ended up leaving me. And then I ended up finding another woman that I fell in love with, and I swore this time is going to be different. I'm not going to repeat the same mistakes I repeated with my first marriage. And the problem is I never addressed the underlying symptoms. So they talk about, addiction is always just a symptom of something else going on. There's generally always underlying issues that we need to address. And what we do is we use addiction to escape, whether it's alcohol or drugs or gambling or whatever the addiction is. And I had never addressed the underlying issues during my first marriage. And I ended up marrying, the love of my life at that time. And I would say the marriage was the high. The love was the high for a while until it wasn't. And slowly but surely, the old behavior started coming back into that marriage. The gambling, we would take trips to the casinos, and I would always stay up later than I was supposed to stay up, and end up going back downstairs. And slowly but surely, my gambling, my alcoholism, and all the addiction progressed. They also talk about addiction starting as being fun, and then leading to fun with problems, and then leading to all problems. And that's exactly my story. My addiction was fun until it started leading to fun with problems, and then eventually it led to all problems. And what happened was it started with my alcoholism. I was drinking uncontrollably, and we ended up separating because I couldn't stop drinking. And I had to move back in with my parents at the age of about 39, 40 years old. And then I was able to move back into the house, and I agreed to not drink. And then my gambling spiraled out of control. I started playing online poker. I started playing online blackjack. I started sports gambling more. We talk about not gambling if you may be at high risk. So some of the high risk symptoms are if you're struggling with loneliness, grief, or loss, if you're under financial strain. And at that point in time, I was going through a major life transition because, as I mentioned, I was at that restaurant for 24 years. I was at the same restaurant, and it had gone out of business. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I was trying to find myself. So I turned to gambling for the first time as a financial solution. Well, where that led me was, again, separated from my wife, because even though I wasn't drinking, now all of a sudden my gambling behavior was becoming a problem. So I moved again back in with my parents, and right at that time is when the casinos had opened up in Maryland. And I'm thinking I have nothing to lose. I'm losing my wife. I'm probably going to lose my house. I'm losing everything. It's go big or go home time is the way I'm thinking about it. And I started going to the casino, and I started playing amounts of money that I would have never imagined playing in my life. I was gambling recklessly. And again, the worst thing that could happen to someone like me, that someone's, that's at risk of slipping into a gambling disorder, a serious gambling disorder, is I won. The first couple of weeks, I won, and I literally thought I was a professional blackjack player. And I can tell you right now, anybody that thinks they're a professional blackjack player is heading down a very scary road. Because what happens is, when they say the house always wins, that doesn't mean the house always wins. Okay, that means that I think no one gets addicted to gambling if they don't win. Okay, all of us gamblers, we go on our runs. We're going to go on a run. We're going to go on a hot streak. But what happens when our run goes cold? Do we have the ability to stop when we lose that money? Or do we start chasing our losses? Because once we start chasing those losses, that's when it can spiral, completely out of control. And that's what happened to me. I had relapsed on alcohol. I'm separated from my wife. So I had all the high-risk symptoms at this point. I'm struggling with loneliness, grief, and loss. I'm separated from my wife. I'm struggling with alcoholism. I'm struggling with mental health, depression and anxiety. And I'm under financial strain. I had absolutely no business to be gambling at that point in time. The only high-risk symptom I didn't have was being underage. I was obviously over the legal age, but I had every other high-risk symptom, and I crossed that invisible line, and one night I lost all the money I'd won back. I put cash advances on my credit cards, and I ended up walking out of that casino deep, deep in debt. And then I started chasing those losses, And at the end, I had a do or die day where I said, if I don't win today, I'm going to kill myself. And fortunately, I wasn't able to go through with my plan. There was what I consider divine intervention. I look at it as my God intervened that day. And it's funny because when I was sitting at that blackjack table, I went on the run of my life that day. I was up more chips. I call them chips because I never saw one single dollar of those chips than I'd ever been up in my life. And I remember thinking to God is going to bail me out today. And what happened was that run went cold, and I watched those chips, that pile just kept depleting, and I kept thinking, a gambler starts thinking, oh, it's got to come around, it's got to come around. We start pressing our bets and betting more, and then all of a sudden it keeps going down, and next thing I knew, all those chips were gone. And now I look back and I realized that my higher power did intervene. He got me help that day. I was escorted out of the casino by the police, taken to a psych ward, and that was the day my recovery journey began. And I picked up a lot of very valuable tools in recovery. The big thing recovery's really taught me is to walk through fear, not turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms to get through fear, and that's what I did my entire life. Like I said, sports was my escape until I started turning to unhealthy coping mechanisms, that worked for a while until they didn't work anymore. So my greatest encouragement to you is just, we only get one life, just try to make the best right decision for yourself. And that's the way I just try to do every day. I just try to do the next right thing and really think and pause before you make a decision, because I acted off impulse for many years. And it only takes that one time where we act off impulse and get ourselves into a bind. Gambling is very financially devastating. I mean, it's the most financially devastating addiction out there. So just be careful. If you do end up gambling down the road, just set healthy limits. Make sure you're staying within it. Make sure that you're gambling with money that you can afford to lose, and watch and make sure it's not interfering with your life, because that's what I look back. Gambling took a lot of time for me over the years, and that's, the time is the one thing we can't get back. So thank you all so much for joining us tonight, and thank you for letting me share my story. I appreciate it, and I'll turn it back to Heather.
He's always inspirational. He's great to work with. So just to go over, Will touched on a lot of these, but the signs of a gambling disorder. So we just want to make sure, again, it's that preoccupation with gambling. Can't stop thinking about it, spending quite a bit of time on it, unable to cut back or control that behavior. And then when you do try to cut back or stop, you get irritable or restless. It can even lead to depression and anxiety or other mental health disorders. You're risking more money, so you kind of build up a tolerance like you do with substance misuse. So you need to bet more and more money to kind of get that desired excitement or high. Will talked about chasing losses, so that's another one. And then it just really does impact the family, like Will talked about too. And, it can have very detrimental effects on school, academics, your job, and just the financial problems really can create just a hole, that's really difficult to dig out of. So just really quickly, just wanted to show you our most recent data in our survey shows about 4% of Maryland residents have a gambling addiction. So basically, if you know somebody out there that seems to be gambling out of control, they may be able to cut back on their own. But for 4% of Maryland residents, they can't do it on their own, or they need extra support. So they can call in to the center, the 1-800-GAMBLER helpline, and talk to someone like Will to help them access treatment. The next slide. So this was one that we did just to show you that 3 and 4% down on this end are people that aren't betting on sports. So only about 4% or 3% of those who don't gamble on sports are have a gambling disorder. But as you look here in this 20%, those are people that bet on sports online. So it's just showing you that that activity, it has a higher addiction rate than some of the other ones that are not as fast-paced and convenient. And this is just a snapshot of our calls for help. I do got to put 2024 in, but we've just seen an increase in calls, mostly from people in the age ranges of 18 to 24 and 25 to 34. So basically, we are doing a lot of work at the colleges in the state. We have small grants that we're able to do prevention strategies on campus. So, those of you that are near to going to college, you might actually see messaging at your college campuses. And then the next slide shows of the helpline callers in August 2024, they could pick more than one problem that they were experiencing, but this is just to show you that people really do experience a lot of problems due to gambling. And they have different reasons for calling in, but majority of them, it's the financial reason that they're calling in the most. So those of you that are underage out there, is it possible to avoid all gambling if you're underage? In this culture, probably not. I mean, I would say, you know, you can buy a raffle ticket. It's very low risk. Or you can go to the arcade and play games. It's like, I don't want you to feel like totally guilty because it is pretty much really impossible to avoid all types of gambling behaviors. But, you know, even purchasing stocks would be considered a type of, it meets the definition of gambling, but it's low risk. But what we want you to know today is to just decrease as much gambling as possible if you're underage and just know the risk to it. It seems like a lot of times when I talk to the youth, when I'm in the classroom, they just aren't even aware or think of it as a risky behavior. But there's definitely risk, as we've shown you today. Some of the other negative consequences of underage gambling, obviously losing things of value, owing money to other people, which oftentimes can lead to disagreements and conflicts, which could then cause fighting. Trouble with your parents or police or people that you owe money to. Also the declining grades. And then you start to kind of, your moral decision making can be jeopardized as, you know, the pool of gambling addiction may pull you in the direction to lie and steal or even to commit a crime. So we definitely want to avoid that. And just hurting the people that you love. So those are things that it could cause, especially for our younger people. And why should you, if you're under 21, not gamble? I kind of already covered this, but if you're under 21 and you're gambling, especially gambling frequently, you are 4 times more likely to become a problem gambler later in life. So as long as you can avoid that behavior, the better. Also, you're more likely to engage in other risky behaviors, so violence, sexual activity, drugs and alcohol use, it all kind of goes hand in hand. So people that are engaged in one risky behavior are also more likely to be engaged in others. So again, make good decisions. The brain is still developing until age 25, so again, you got to know that your impulse control and your emotional control and decision making aren't fully developed, so it kind of puts you at risk to make decisions that aren't always the best, so just know that. And then also, we just are really concerned about the mental health outcomes and all other, you know, academic and other pursuits you may have for your goals in life would be jeopardized if you're gambling a lot. And how do we help prevent addiction? This could be with substance misuse or problem gambling. Will touched on it. We definitely are looking at wellness. I have my master's in public health, so that's kind of how I got into this job. I do put a plug in for public health. If you would like to help others and give back to your community, a public health degree is a great way to do that. But you want to live your best life now and have healthy habits, including getting enough sleep, exercising, eating properly. I mean, all the things that you learned in your health class and that probably your parents and teachers tell you every day. Develop some positive coping skills. So like Will said, sports was his. I know a lot of you out there probably play sports. That's a good way to cope with stress. You can also take a walk, listen to music, whatever it is that you like to do. Become active in your faith-based community. Say a lot of prayers. And if you think you need it or someone in your life needs it, definitely seek counseling. That's the way to go if you need that support. And here's some other kind of positive coping skills. You know, a lot of these things you can just Google and find different apps, like if you want to listen to Headspace or things that can help you kind of reset your brain and kind of calm down from a busy day or a hard day at school. And then finally, we just wanted to really go over some of the resources for help. So basically, we talked about 1-800-GAMBLER helpline, which is now the national number. It's just, it was here in Maryland first. Well, it actually was in New Jersey too, but there was a few states it was, and now it's been made the national number. So you can just text, chat, or call 24 hours, 7 days a week, and someone live will pick up the phone and talk to you and just have you access resources for help. And we have our website, helpmygamblingproblem.org, which has a lot of videos and additional information. We also provide free webinars through our office if you'd like more information on this topic. Also, there's no cost treatment for Maryland residents. So through the Problem Gambling Fund, if someone wants to seek counseling for a gambling disorder, it's totally free to that person, because obviously finances are a challenge for them at this time, and their family members can also get free treatment. So the Problem Gambling Fund will pay for the counselor's time so that the individual does not have to pay for it. And then just call and talk. 1-800-GAMBLER will lead you to someone like Will that will talk you through whatever you need to do. And there's also Gamblers Anonymous, kind of similar to Alcoholics Anonymous. It's kind of like a self-help group to provide support for people that would like to stay in recovery or to access recovery. If you'd like to do a self-assessment, we do have one on our website. It's kind of like a quiz or like a screening tool that you can use to see if you may be at risk of a gambling disorder. And if it scores high, then just please let us know and give us a call, and we'd be glad to help. Just so those out there that are on the gambling apps, there are ways to restrict like the amount of money spent, as well as time limits. Just like you can set, like on your tablet, a time limit, you can do that through the sports betting apps. So, of course, it's best to set those before you get into the action of the game and the excitement. You want to set the limits first. And then there's other apps such as like Gamban and BetBlocker, which will block all gambling sites from your devices. So BetBlocker is free, and it is out of the UK. Actually, the UK has had gambling activities and sports betting longer than the United States have, so they're kind of ahead of us. But they do have BetBlocker, and they do a good job of blocking all the gambling websites and any kind of apps that come onto your personal devices. And then finally, I think that probably everybody out there probably knows about 988. But 988 is the suicide and crisis lifeline. So if anyone just needs someone to talk to, they're just having a really rough time, there is that number that anyone can call, and that's also a national number. All right, let's see if we have any questions out there. You have a question, Mr. Luckman?
Yes.
Okay.
You talked about the different forms and low-risk style of gambling. Is there a progression you guys have seen with our youth in terms of how they get started and how it becomes such a problem? Do they start with the low level and move on to the high, or is it more they go right to the high level games?
So there, I'd say in the research, there definitely is, that's similar to drug and alcohol, where youth may start with especially scratch tickets or lottery tickets, or just playing kind of some gambling games on the weekend, and then it can escalate. So yeah, there definitely is some of that in the literature. But from what the students out there can probably answer the question too, but when I go into classrooms and I'll ask kids, like, how are you starting to gamble, or how are you accessing these apps even though you're under 21? And they'll say that their parents set it up for them, or their older sibling or somebody setting up these accounts for them. And some of them will just put them on a budget and just give them a little bit of money. But I don't think that, parents know the risk that it could escalate to a problem. So I think that's how some of them are accessing it, or they go to illegal sites and they're gambling there. So, but probably pretty much now we would say it's all electronic, or scratch tickets pretty much, wouldn't you say, Will?
Yeah, we do consider gaming the gateway to gambling too, with the loot boxes and the skins and esports now where they're betting on their favorite players or whatever. I mean, gaming's a multi-billion-dollar industry too, and certainly it's hitting that same part of the brain with the dopamine hits. So that might be how a lot of these kids are starting off too.
Another one for me. How do peers help their classmates? So how does a St. Joe student help their classmate who they see going down this direction? Because a lot of the resources you have are for the person to call or to take a quiz. But how does a friend help a friend?
So I think you should always be looking out for your friends. And one way to do that is to be a good role model at any age. But it kind of goes back, Mr. Luckman, to having difficult conversations. So basically, you want to start the conversation, obviously one-on-one. You don't want to embarrass anybody in front of a group of people. But what you want to do is you want to just be supportive, and you want to state what the problem is. So you might say to your friend, I noticed you're on your cell phone a lot looking at, the betting odds or the parlays, whatever you're looking at. So I'm concerned because I see you spending more and more time and money on this. So do you think it's a problem? And then just start that conversation. And people often will just spill it out. They'll tell you what they're thinking. But yeah, we actually got that same question from a student, recently at another school presentation we did a couple weeks ago, and they were very concerned about their classmate. And I think sometimes when it comes to these behaviors, we can't always control what our friends do, but they'll know we care. And they might not be able to stop right away, but they'll remember that we said something. But still, I think if it's really causing them problems that you think it's very much affecting them, then they probably should say, would you like me to go with you to talk to an adult at school or your parent about this problem?
Yeah, expressing your concerns. We've been at schools where they have pointed the kid out, oh, he's got a gambling problem in front of a group, and kind of embarrassed him. And actually one time it was a 15-year-old that did actually call me later on just to have the conversation, and I'm not going to tell anyone whether they have a gambling problem or not, but we had the conversation. He explained that he was, I obviously was under legal age to gamble, but he said, hey, I'm not betting more than I can afford to lose. I even have a job, I said, hey, just keep an eye on it. I'm here for you if it does become a problem. But just more, like Heather said, pointing out what you see. You seem preoccupied. Why are you always trying to borrow money? I'm concerned. You just don't seem yourself. Not necessarily you have a gambling problem,
And I think this generation is much better at talking about mental health and their feelings and what they're seeing. I mean, I remember when I was in middle school, I had my best friend. When we went on to high school, she started hanging out with a different crowd, smoking and drinking. And I think in my brain, I was like, that's not really for me. So I kind of gravitated to another friend group. But I think now looking back, I wish I would have said something to her and said, hey, why are you doing that? And tried to still be her friend. I think, now it's definitely more acceptable to talk about stuff like that. And fortunately, that friend I still stay in touch with now, and she's doing well today. But I think that, back then, I probably should have said something to her. And I wish I would have, kind of looking back.
One other question that's there is, you went over a bunch of different signs to look for. Is there one or two in particular that stands out for the youth underage gambling problem? And is there a certain way to look at them? Like you had anxiety up there. Is it anxiety because the game's going on, or is it an anxiety throughout the day kind of thing? Or what should parents be looking for with their sons here at Mount St. Joe?
Definitely preoccupation. I mean, and it could be anxiety, all the above, throughout the day, while the game's on, the preoccupation, the whole 9 yards, just a change in their behavior. Something's going on with them. They're not on drugs. I know they're not drinking, but something just doesn't seem right. Or why do they keep asking me for money? What do you think?
So, I mean, generally it can go both ways, right? So somebody may be suffering from a mental health disorder. Maybe you're anxious at school or about a test or a class you're not doing so well in, or you're depressed because maybe your pet died or you're struggling in life about something, and we all go through our bumps in the road. But then again, it's about how do you cope with that, right? So then that's when people may turn to gambling and be more vulnerable to having the gambling problem. So we do want to pay attention to kind of those transitions in life and bumps in the road where you'd be more likely to turn to something negative that wouldn't be good for your future. But it can also work the other way. So youth can start gambling and then it gets out of control. So then they start having anxiety and depression about how much money they've lost or how their grades are slipping. So I think, it could go both ways. I mean, I think for parents, it's really about being able to keep that connection with your child. Keep a conversation flowing. I know it's not easy because I got my teenagers too. Sometimes they don't want to talk to me about things, but you try to just stay connected with them and ask them about things they're doing. And if you see them on the computer a lot, hopefully you know somewhat what they're doing with their time. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
At this time, I want to thank Ms. Eshleman and Mr. Hyman for their time. And we hope everyone enjoyed that. And if you have any questions, please see your school counselor tomorrow or in the future. Thank you.